So we're back. We're on chapter 22, and it's called The Merry Men of Sherwood Forest. Now, when we last left, if you remember, Alex and her group had found Merlin and King Arthur. Well, almost King Arthur. So they were getting to know him, but then Alex found a page from The Wizard of Oz. And so she had figured out that maybe she could make the spell to get back to where Connor is. So this chapter is The Merry Men of Sherwood Forest. And we're on page 298 if you are keeping up. Okay. Once Connor, the Tin Woodman, and Peter were thrown into the book, it didn't take long for the words of the story to form a world around them. A word stretched beneath Connor's feet. Before he had time to read it, the word turned into liquid, and Connor sank into a large body of water. A strong force pushed him deeper and deeper into the water. He was so discombobulated, he didn't know which way the surface was, or if there was even a surface to be found. He stretched his arms and legs out as far as he could to find something to grab. But he was alone in this world of water. Connor was drowning in the ocean of a literary world. Just as Connor was fearing the end was near, he felt a hard hand grab the back of his shirt and lift him upward. The next thing he knew, he was lying on a wooden floor. He rolled to his back and saw the Tin Woodman and Peter looking down at him. "Connor, are you all right?" the Tin Woodman asked. "You landed in the stream, and you had quite a fit." "I was afraid I'd landed in the ocean of Moby Dick or the Swiss Family Robinson," he said. "It's not even that deep," Peter said. "You must be a terrible swimmer." Connor sat up and looked around. He and his friends were on a narrow bridge over a shallow stream. They were in the middle of a forest with tall and thin trees. But there was nothing unique to help him recognize which forest it was. "Does this place look familiar?" the Tin Woodman asked. "No," Connor said. "Quick, we need to find the book. It's got to be here somewhere." They spread out and searched the woods. "Connor, I found it," Peter said. He pointed to a green book floating down the stream. "After that book," Connor shouted. He dove into the stream and swam after it. Peter flew above the water and tried to grab it, but the stream's current picked up and sloshed it around. Just as they both narrowed in on it, the book burst into flames, even though it was soaked and surrounded by water. It burned into ashes and the stream washed them away. Connor felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. His uncle must have destroyed it in Wonderland. They were trapped. "What happened?" the Tin Woodman asked. He watched them from the bank, where it was dry. "The book's gone," Connor said, and shook his head. "We're stuck here, and that means my sister and Mother Goose are probably stuck wherever they are, too. We'll never get to the kingdoms in time to warn them. They'll never have time to prepare for the army coming." Connor crawled out of the stream, sat on the ground, and covered his face with his hands. The Tin Woodman lowered his head and placed a hand over where his heart should be. "Don't worry, lads," Peter said. "The Lost Boys will come for us." "They're in a different dimension, Peter," Connor snapped. "How do you expect them to rescue us?" "How do you expect them to rescue us?" Peter mocked him. "This is serious, Peter," Connor yelled. "We might be trapped here forever." "We might be trapped here Wait. Forever?" Peter said. The reality of the situation hit him, and he descended to the ground. "So I may never see Neverland or the Lost Boys again?" Connor sighed. "I'm afraid so." Peter sat on the ground, his legs spread out in front of him. His mouth fell open and his eyes filled with tears. "There must be something we could do," the Tin Woodman said. "I suppose the best thing to do is figure out where we are," Connor said. "Hopefully we'll find someone who could help us." They journeyed deeper into the forest, but found nothing for miles. Peter flew into the sky for a better view and saw a large stone structure in the distance. They figured it was their best option for the time being and headed toward it. Along the way, they spotted a piece of parchment pinned to a tree. That's a funny word for paper. It read, "Wanted, dead or alive. The thief, vandal, and outlaw, Robin of Locksley." by order of the Sheriff of Nottingham. Reward if caught. Connor read the poster a few times just to make sure he wasn't imagining it. Of all the places to be stranded, he figured it could have been much worse. "Guys, we're in Robin Hood," Connor said. The 10 women and Peter were excited to hear it, but their smiles quickly faded. "Who?" 10 women asked. "Is that Red Riding Hood's brother?" Peter asked. "No, but this is good news," Connor said. "Robin Hood is a hero. If anyone can help us in this world, it will be him. We gotta find him." The 10 women and Peter eyed the poster suspiciously. If he's a hero, why is he wanted by the sheriff of such and such?" the 10 women asked. "Well, the Sheriff of Nottingham is actually the bad guy in the story," Connor explained. "Robin Hood steals from the rich and then he gives to the poor. He's the guy we want to find." "I say we capture Robin Hood and turn him in for the reward," Peter said. "Surely being rich would help us more than a criminal can." "I think the boy has a point," the 10 women said. On the spot, the 10 women and Peter began making plans to capture the outlaw. They ignored Connor, who frantically shook his head at the idea. "Guys," Connor said, "we're not going to kidnap or kill Robin Hood." First, an arrow came out of nowhere and pinned Connor to the tree. He screamed in agony, but stopped once he realized the arrow was stabbing through his sleeve and not his arm. 2 arrows pinned both sides of Peter's pants to the tree beside Connor. "Indians!" Peter screamed. "There are no Indians in Sherwood Forest," Connor said. "Besides, the correct term is Native Americans." An arrow hit the 10 women's back, but it just broke on impact. A bundle of arrows pelted the 10 woodmen. The arrows only bounced off his metal body. The 10 men retrieved the axe and sliced the oncoming arrows in midair. "The night is impenetrable." I can't even say the word. Impenetrable. I can't say the word, sorry. They can't penetrate him. A voice called from somewhere in the treetops. "Merry men, attack!" Before they knew it, 4 men and 5 horses charged through the forest. The men jumped off their horses and circled Connor, Peter, and the 10 woodmen with their weapons raised. One of the men was enormous, standing at 7 feet tall at least, and he held a long staff. A rather flamboyant man who wore clothes made of red silk and a large feathered hat held a sword in each hand. A short padre was among the men and held a crucifix and a Bible like a sword in his shield. There was also a thin musician who didn't have a weapon either, but he strummed chords on a mandolin threateningly while giving the boys a nasty look. "Well, look what we have here," the large man said in his gruff voice. "Sheriff must be getting desperate if he only sent 1 knight and 2 children into the woods," the man in the silk said, and then tossed his hair. "Oh, Heavenly Father, what kind of coward sends children to do a sinful work?" the padre said, and shook his head. Connor almost didn't recognize the men circling them. They were much more weathered and aggressive than he was expecting. "Pirates!" Peter yelled. "There are no pirates of Sherwood Forest either," Connor said. "These are the merry men of Sherwood Forest. They work with Robin Hood." "Looks like they found us before we could find them," the 10 woodmen said, completely distrustful of the men around him. "Which one is Robin Hood?" "Did you hear that, men? The knight has requested an audience with me," shouted a voice from above. A man suddenly dropped down from the treetops and landed on his feet. He was tall and handsome, with a red beard and a bright smile. He wore dark green clothing and feathered cap and tall boots. He held a bow in one hand and a quiver of arrows strapped to his back. "Robin Hood," Connor said excitedly. "We were just talking about you." "And plotting my arrest, or so I overheard," Robin Hood said. "But there shall be no victory for you today, knight. You are no match for the great Robin Hood and his merry men." Robin Hood rarely made eye contact as he talked, and he spoke as if there was a large audience around him at all times. Connor was very disappointed. The legendary Prince of Thieves was not the compassionate hero he grew up believing in, but a rather boisterous narcissist who praised himself in the third person. "Time out," Connor said. "First off, you don't have to shout. We're right here. Second, this is all a big misunderstanding. Do not speak, child. Accomplice?" Robin Hood commanded. "Shame on you for allowing the Sheriff of Nottingham to use your innocence as a ploy for his wrongdoing. My quarrel is with the knight standing before me, whom the sheriff sent to capture and potentially kill me." Robin Hood glared at the Tin Woodman. The Tin Woodman glanced behind himself to make sure he wasn't referring to someone else. "Me?" he asked softly. "But I am not a knight." "Do not lie to me, knight," Robin Hood warned. "Only a man working for the sheriff wears armor such as yours. You cannot fool me. Do not insult your intelligence by testing mine." "Oh, I'm not wearing armor," the Tin Woman said. "You see, where I come from, there was a witch who cast a spell on me." "Do not fill my head with tales of witchcraft," Robin Hood ordered. "You must return to the sheriff and tell him Robin Hood is insulted by this attempt to seize me. Now, go, and I shall spare your life." The merrymen cheered, and the musician played a chord on his mandolin. The Tin Woodman stayed put and eyed the men confoundedly. "The night lingers," Robin Hood said. "Sorry, but where am I supposed to go?" the Tin Woodman said. "I told you I'm not a knight, and I have no idea where to find the sheriff." Robin Hood stared at him and stroked his beard. Clearly he wasn't a knight. But Robin Hood was too cocky to believe he was mistaken, so he had to think of another reason why the Tin Woodman was showing resistance. "The knight is so overwhelmed by my presence, he is confused," Robin Hood told his merry men. "Little John, Will Scarlet, round them up. We'll take the knight and children back to our camp until they regain control of their senses." The merry men removed Connor and Peter from the tree and tied their hands and the Tin Woodman's hands together. Robin Hood and the merry men climbed on their horses and set off deeper into the woods, pulling their captives behind them. "Some hero," Peter said under his breath. "This man's a lunatic," the Tin Woodman said. "You guys were right," Connor said. "We definitely should have captured him and turned him in for the money." "Allan a Dale, my faithful minstrel," Robin Hood called to the musician, "play us a cheerful tune of my courage and glory to pass the time as we venture home." The musician played a song on his mandolin and sang along. "Robin of Locksley, Robin of Locksley, England's most treasured man. He takes delight in leading the fight to save good Nottingham. Unlike the sheriff, Robin is cherished. His heart is pure and true. Loved by the ladies, they want his babies and love his merry crew. The sheriff grows scared as Robin prepares to end Prince John's regimen. If you want freedom, a better kingdom, then sing this merry theme. Robin of Locksley, 'tis no one greater than Robin of Locksley, England's most treasured man." The merry men sang this song over and over and over again as Robin Hood played conductor, irritating Connor, Peter, and the Tin Woodman to no end. By nightfall, they had arrived at the camp, which consisted of a half-dozen tents around a small campfire. The merry men pulled their captives into a tent and tied them to a pole inside. The singing continued outside once the merry men gathered around the campfire, forcing Connor, Peter, and the Tin Woodman to endure several more hours of terrible lyrics praising a terrible man. "This is going to drive me insane, and I live on a desert island in outer space with little boys. I've got patience by the ton," Peter said, and shoved Connor as if he could do something to solve the matter. "I don't know why you're shoving me, Leaf Boy," Connor said, and pushed him back. "Because we wouldn't be here if you and your sister hadn't lost control of your uncle," Peter said. "Maybe if you and your friend didn't have a pixie-sized brain, she wouldn't have gotten kidnapped," Connor said. With every remark, they shoved each other a little harder. "Gentlemen, keep fighting," the Tin Woman said. "Why?" Connor said. "Because the harder you shove each other, the looser the ropes around my hands become," he said. Connor and Peter shared an excited look and took turns in knocking into each other as hard as they could. They were so desperate to get away from the merry men, they didn't notice how much it hurt their shoulders. After a few moments, the Tin Woodman was able to pull his hands free from the rope, and he untied the boys. "Connor, there's something sticking out of your pocket," Peter said. Connor patted his pants and felt a piece of paper coming out of his back pocket. Knocking back and forth into Peter must have pushed it up. He unfolded it, and his eyes grew twice their size when he discovered what it was. "Hey, guys, it's a page from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz," he exclaimed. "We could use it to get back into Oz, and then get back to the fairy tale world." "But don't we need a potion to do that?" the Tin Woodman asked. "Well, we'll make the potion. I have the recipe memorized," he said. Connor was beaming with joy. When he had stuffed the page into his back pocket in the cave, he never imagined it would later act as a lifeboat. And even better, Connor remembered his sister had one too. He knew it was only a matter of time before Alex found it and used it to escape wherever she was, if she hadn't already. His celebration was cut short when they heard a fearful sound coming from outside. It wasn't another song, but horses. Hundreds of them. Connor, Peter, and the Tin Woodman peeked outside the tent and saw a fleet of soldiers emerge from Sherwood Forest and surround the merry men's camp. They arrived so suddenly, Robin Hood and his men didn't have time to retrieve their weapons. A middle-aged man with a dark beard led the soldiers, and he wore a bright star over his armor. "Uh-oh," Connor said. "Who's that?" Peter asked. "Look, man, the Sheriff of Nottingham has come to pay us a visit," Robin Hood said, answering his own question. "To what do we owe this dishonor?" "Robin of Locksley," the sheriff addressed, "you and your men are under arrest for thievery, vandalism, and running from the law. You will come with us to Nottingham, where you will await trial. Any attempt of escape will result in death." The sheriff nodded to his soldiers. The archers stepped forward and aimed their bows at Robin Hood and the merrymen. There didn't appear to be any possible escape. "This is terrible," Connor whispered. "Why, that man's a nightmare," Peter said. "No, it's terrible for us," Connor said. "The sheriff's going to find us and take us back to Nottingham with them." "But we were captured. We weren't associated with them," the Tin Woodman said. "It doesn't matter," Connor said. "I know the sheriff seems more tolerable than Robin Hood, but he's seriously bad dude. He'll take us back to the castle and torture us for sport." Peter and Tin Woodman eyed each other nervously. Connor paced around the tent, thinking of some way they could escape. All they had in the tent was a raggedy blanket and a white sheet bundled up on the ground. "So what do we do?" Peter asked. "Oh, I've got an idea," Connor said. "It's crazy, but it just might work. So go along with whatever I say." Outside, things were becoming increasingly tense. Robin Hood left the campfire and approached the Sheriff of Nottingham. "You are a very clever sheriff," Robin Hood said. "You planned for me to capture one of your knights earlier, so you could follow him back to our camp. Well played." "You imbecile," the sheriff said. "We found you because your voice carries for miles." All the merry men slumped. They knew their leader's volume would get them into trouble eventually. "Do you know what else carries through the forest, Sheriff?" Robin Hood asked. "My love of Nottingham. So take me away, beat me, torture me, and kill me in the end. You may render my body lifeless, but you will never destroy my spirit," Little John screamed. "Yes, that's what I was about to say." "No, sir. Look, there's something ghostly coming this way," Will Scarlet said. The merry men and Nottingham soldiers all turned to the center of the camp. Connor had covered himself in the raggedy blanket. He was hunched over, and he limped toward them with his arms extended like a zombie. "Who is this?" the sheriff asked. "Declare yourself at once, or I will have an arrow shot through your heart." "Oh," Connor gulped. He hoped this would work. "I do not fear your arrows, for I cannot be killed," he said in a ghoulish voice. "I am Connor Mundo, the feared sorcerer of Sherwood." "Sorcerer!" Robin Hood laughed. "This boy is a mere child we found in the forest." "Silence!" Connor yelled at Robin Hood. "You are blinded by arrogance and were easily fooled by my mortal disguise. I come before you now to offer the sheriff and his men a warning. Leave my forest at once, or I shall sick my army of the dead upon you." The sheriff and his soldiers laughed uproariously. Connor wasn't fooling anybody. "This boy must learn what happens to people who threaten us," the sheriff said. "Shoot him." "Now," Connor whispered. As the archers aimed their arrows at him, the Tin Woodman ran out of the tent, but without his head. The merry men and the soldiers screamed at the terrifying sight. For all they knew, he was a headless man back from the dead. The Tin Woodman ran toward the soldiers, and many of them retreated into the woods. "Peter, you're next," Connor whispered. Peter shot out of the tent, wrapped in a white sheet. He flew above the camp and moaned in agony like a tortured spirit. The merry men held one another and screamed. The padre said a prayer and held his crucifix up to the hovering spirit. These forests have been conquered by black magic," the sheriff shouted. "Forget about Robin of Locksley and his merry men. We must return to Nottingham at once." The sheriff whipped the reins of his horse and retreated into the woods. The few remaining soldiers followed him, many of them ripping their armor as they hurried away to run faster. When the coast was clear of soldiers, Connor took off the raggedy blanket. Peter threw off the sheet, and the Tin Woodman retrieved his head from the tent and screwed it back on like a bottle cap. They burst into hysterical laughter and gave one another high fives. "Did you see the look on their faces?" Connor asked. "We petrified them," Peter said. "I would have never thought to take off my head," the Tin Woodman said. "Good idea, Connor." The merry men were trembling and still clutched one another. Robin Hood approached Connor and his friends despite the men's pleas to stay away. He looked him in the eyes and bowed. "O great sorcerer of Sherwood Forest," Robin Hood said, "you have saved my merry men and me from the gallows. We are eternally grateful and shall spend the rest of our days as your humble servants." The merry men followed his example and bowed too. The Tin Woodman and Peter grinned and nudged Connor forward. At first, he thought about telling Robin Hood and his men the truth about who he was and how he and his friends had come to Sherwood Forest. On second thought, he was afraid the truth would cause their heads to implode. Their current situation seemed to be more beneficial. "You're welcome, Robin of Locksley," Connor said, "and I'll take you up on that." "We'll do anything for you, sorcerer, anything at all," Robin Hood said. "Well, in that case," Connor said, "absolutely no more singing about yourself. And you don't have to call me sorcerer. It's already getting old. I'm Connor Bailey. And this is the Tin Woodman, and that's Peter Pan." Robin Hood kissed their feet. Had he not been such a pretentious jerk, it might have been uncomfortable. But they enjoyed seeing him so humbled. "Connor Bailey, Tin Woodman, and Peter of Pan," Robin Hood said. "Allow me to formally introduce the merry band of men behind me. Little John, Will Scarlet, Friar Tuck, and my minstrel, Alan Adale." Each of the merry men stood upright as his name was called and then fell back into a bow. "Your request is our command," Robin Hood declared. "Fantastic," Connor said and rubbed his hands together. "First thing tomorrow, I'm going to need to give you a list of items I'll need help collecting." "Consider it done," he said. Connor had been right all along. Robin Hood would prove to be very helpful. And that is the end of chapter 22.